The mop moved in slow, even circles. Left, right, overlap, pull back. Ray Calloway had done it so many times that his arms did the work without him thinking about it. That was fine. He preferred it that way. Deck 31 of Station Drilova 9 smelled like recycled air and machine oil, same as always. The corridor was long and narrow, lit by pale yellow strips along the ceiling. Nobody ever came down here unless something was broken. Ray had worked here for 11 years, and in that time, he had learned one very useful truth about maintenance work. If you stayed quiet and kept the floors clean, the whole galaxy forgot you existed. He had his earpiece in. Sully, his service tablet AI, was playing an old recorded ballgame through it. The crowd noise was tinny and distant. Ray did not care. It was familiar, and familiar was good. He pushed the mop bucket forward 3 feet and started the next section. That was when the lights changed. It was not dramatic. There was no explosion, no alarm screaming at full volume. The pale yellow strips simply shifted to a dim red, and the soft hum of the corridor's ventilation system dropped half a tone. Ray stopped mopping. He had worked on this station long enough to know what that color change meant. It was not a fire drill. It was not a pressure leak. It was a full lockdown. Sully's voice came through the earpiece, quiet and flat. Ray, I am picking up unusual signal activity on all primary decks. Boarding protocols appear to have been initiated from an external source. Ray set the mop handle against the wall. How many ships? Unclear. Communications are being suppressed. I can tell you that the blast doors on decks 1 through 15 have already sealed. The pattern matches a coordinated military entry. Ray looked down the corridor. The blast door at the far end had dropped, a thick slab of gray metal, floor to ceiling, sealing off the path toward the upper station. He turned and looked the other way. The other blast door was down too. He was not scared. He had been in worse places than a locked corridor. What he felt was something closer to calculation, a quiet sorting of what he knew, what he had, and what his options were. His maintenance cart was parked 6 meters back. It held a full set of tools, 2 emergency ration bars, a portable junction relay, a spool of wire, and a handheld cutting torch. His keycard gave him access to every maintenance hatch and utility corridor on the station. Most people did not know how many of those there were. Ray knew every single one. He pulled out the tablet and switched Sully from audio to active mode. The small screen showed a rough station map, most of it now blinking in warning red. He studied it without expression. Vorkai, he asked. Signal structure is consistent with Vorkai military encryption, Sully said. They have been at the outer edge of neutral space for 2 weeks. The diplomatic delegation upstairs was still in negotiations. Ray said. Yes, were. He picked up his cart and moved it toward the maintenance hatch set into the wall halfway down the corridor. A small, rectangular panel that most people walked past without ever noticing. He had cleaned its hinges last month. They would open without noise. He was reaching for the handle when he heard the sound. It was very small. A shift of fabric, a held breath let out too quickly. It came from behind the chemical storage rack 3 meters to his left, a tall shelving unit holding drums of cleaning solution and pipe sealant canisters. Ray did not stop moving. He did not turn around. He simply reached the maintenance hatch, set his hand on it, and said, without raising his voice, I know you're there. I'm not going to hurt you. Silence. I'm the janitor, he added. I clean this deck. There is nowhere on this corridor I haven't looked at 100 times, and I can see your shadow on the floor. Another pause. Then, slowly, a figure stepped out from behind the rack. She was tall by most alien standards, though not unusually so for an Ithori, a species that had evolved from something avian long ago and still carried the shape of it in their bone structure. Long neck, angular face, feather-like crest folded close to her head in what Ray recognized as a stress posture. She wore clothes that cost more than Ray made in 2 years, and she was holding a ceremonial blade in both hands, its edge angled toward him. She was also clearly terrified, though she was doing a remarkable job of not showing it. I am Princess Saravel, she said, and her voice only shook slightly. Daughter of the Ithori sovereignty. If you take 1 step toward me. I'm not taking a step toward you, Ray said. I'm trying to open a maintenance hatch. She stared at him. He looked at the blade. It was beautiful, etched silver, ceremonial grip, absolutely not made for actual combat. You're going to cut yourself on that thing if you're not careful. The grip isn't made for a fighting stance. Put it away. The princess did not put it away, but she lowered it, slightly, because something in his voice was so completely without threat that it made her threat feel unnecessary. What is happening? She asked. The station's been taken. Vorkai forces, most likely. They've sealed the main decks. Ray opened the maintenance hatch. Beyond it was a narrow passage, dark, smelling of metal and old air. He reached in and clicked on the work light clipped to his collar. Your guards, where are they? We were separated when the blast doors came down. Captain Ivila was on the deck above me. Her crest shifted. She told me to run. Ray nodded once. He looked at the princess's clothes, formal robes, layered, trailing near the floor, with a collar piece that added 4 inches to her height, and a set of decorative pauldrons over her shoulders. He reached into his cart and pulled out a folded maintenance jumpsuit. You can't fit through most of these passages dressed like that, he said, and held it out. Sarah looked at the jumpsuit as if he had handed her a used cloth. I am the crown princess of, and right now there are armed soldiers 2 decks above us who would very much like to find you, Ray said. He was not unkind about it. He was simply stating a fact. So you can keep the robes and stay here, or you can put this on and come with me. She took the jumpsuit. While she changed, he faced the wall, giving her the corridor. Ray checked the station map again on Sully's screen. The communications array was on Deck 7. If it was still functional, a signal could reach Ithori ships before the Vorkai jammed everything. That was his first target. Ready, Sarah said behind him. He turned. She had kept the blade, tucked against her side. He decided not to argue about it. Stay behind me, he said. Move when I move, stop when I stop. Don't speak unless I ask you something. I do not take orders from. You can take them from me, or you can take them from whoever comes through that blast door when it opens. He gestured at the sealed door at the end of the corridor. Sarah closed her mouth. Ray checked the maintenance hatch one more time, confirmed the passage beyond it was clear, and began to move. Behind him, a princess of an interstellar sovereignty followed a human janitor into a narrow, dark tunnel, and the station above them was already full of enemy voices. They had a long way to go. Dust was the first thing Sarah noticed inside the maintenance tunnel. Fine gray dust that settled on everything and went nowhere, because the air in here barely moved. The second thing she noticed was that the passage was designed for someone much smaller than an Ithori princess, and even in the jumpsuit, with her crest pressed flat, her shoulders brushed both walls. Ray moved ahead of her without any sign of discomfort. He was built low and wide, with the kind of unhurried efficiency that came from knowing exactly where each foot was going before it got there. His work light cast a small white circle on the tunnel floor in front of him. He never pointed it at the walls, never swept it around looking for direction. He already knew the direction. Sarah followed and said nothing, because she had told herself she would not complain, and she was going to hold to that. The tunnel split into 3 directions after 40 meters. Ray took the left branch without pausing, then a right, then a steep drop down a ladder that was barely a ladder, just metal rungs bolted into the wall of a vertical shaft. Ray descended it like it was a staircase in his own home. Sarah descended it like a person who had never climbed a ladder in her life, which was accurate. How do you know where you're going? She asked when they reached the bottom. I've been down here a lot, Ray said. That is not an answer. I've replaced the filtration units on this level 6 times. Twice in the dark, because the work lights were out. He glanced back. I know where I'm going because I've had to know. That's all. Sarah considered this. In her world, knowledge of a place was something that came with position. You were given maps, briefings, attendants who knew the route. The idea of learning a location simply by working in it, over and over, until it lived in your hands as much as your head, was not something she had ever thought about. She filed it away and kept moving. Sully's voice came from the tablet on Ray's belt, kept low. I'm reading Vorkai patrol signals on decks 29 and 30. They are moving in a sweep pattern, top to bottom. At current speed, they will reach deck 31 in approximately 19 minutes. What's their sensor setup? Ray asked. Standard military motion detection and thermal imaging. Short range. They are relying on coverage density rather than range. Many soldiers, not powerful sensors. Good. Ray stopped at a junction where 2 passages crossed. He crouched and pressed his hand flat against the floor of the right side passage, held it there for a moment, then pulled back. Heat variance is low. We can use this stretch. Sarah watched him. You felt the temperature through the floor? Metal conducts. If a lot of warm bodies have been walking somewhere recently, the floor holds it a little longer. He stood. Old trick. Doesn't always work, but it works here. They moved through the crossing passage. Sarah's legs were already beginning to ache. She was not built for crouching and crawling, and the tunnel heights varied unpredictably. She did not mention the ache. Ray's tablet beeped softly. He looked at it. Hold. They stopped. Sarah pressed against the tunnel wall and went still. Ahead, through the ventilation grill at the end of the passage, she could see a section of main corridor and two Vorkai soldiers moving through it. They wore full combat armor, dark gray with angular shoulder pieces, and carried weapons slung across their chests. They were talking to each other. Their voices came through the grill, muffled but audible. Sarah's hand found the blade at her side. Ray put one finger up. Wait, without looking at her. The soldiers passed. Their footsteps faded. Ray counted to 10 under his breath, then moved again. Why did you wait so long after they passed? Sarah asked. Vorkai infantry units usually move in twos with a trailing third a few seconds back. Delayed placement. Makes ambushes harder. He did not look back. There was a third one. Sarah had not seen a third one. She thought about that. They moved for another 20 minutes through the tunnel network, crossing two more vertical shafts and a long horizontal section that smelled of warm metal and the sharp chemical bite of coolant fluid. Ray stopped 3 more times without explanation, and each time, some sign of enemy presence passed by on the other side of a wall or grill. He had not been wrong once. Eventually, he stopped at a wider section of tunnel, almost a small room, where for maintenance passages converged. He set his cart against one wall and sat down on a supply case. He pulled 2 ration bars from the cart and held one out towards Sarah. She looked at it. It was a flat rectangle wrapped in paper, the kind of thing she had seen human staff eat quickly in corridors when they thought no one was watching. I am not hungry, she said. You will be. He set it on the case beside her. We've got maybe 10 minutes before we need to move again. Eat it. She picked it up. She unwrapped it. She took a small bite and chewed. It tasted like compressed grain and something faintly sweet. It was not offensive. She ate the rest in silence. Ray ate his own bar in 4 bites and was already looking at the tablet again. Why are you doing this? Sarah asked. He looked up. You could have stayed hidden, she said. Stayed in your tunnel. Waited for it to end. A human maintenance worker on a neutral station. They would probably not have bothered you. Ray thought about it for a moment. Not because he did not know the answer, but because he was choosing how to say it. You were a person in a dangerous place, he said. That's all the reason there needs to be. Sarah studied him. She had spent most of her life around people who helped her because of what she was, her title, her bloodline, the political weight of her presence. The idea that someone would simply help because she was a person, because help was the obvious right thing, landed somewhere quiet and unfamiliar inside her. She did not have words for it yet. She saved the feeling for later. The communications array, she said. You think we can reach it? Deck 7. We're on deck 28 right now. He traced a path on the tablet screen with one finger. Not a straight line, but there's a route that keeps us in maintenance space almost the whole way. There's one open crossing, a cargo concourse on deck 12. 60 meters of open floor with cameras. We'll need to handle that when we get to it. How? I'll figure it out when I see the current camera positions. He looked at her. They move them sometimes during lockdowns. I need to see where they've put them now. Sarah nodded slowly. You planned that far ahead. When I got to you, I already had 4 routes mapped in my head. Ray said, matter-of-factly. I was just waiting to see which one they'd leave open the longest. She stared at him. You had 4 routes planned before you had even spoken to me. I had routes planned about 30 seconds after the lights went red. He picked up the tablet and stood. That's what you do when everything locks down. You figure out how many ways out exist and which one is least likely to get you killed. He moved to the tunnel entrance and checked it. Patrol pattern is shifting. We need to go. Sarah stood, aching legs and all, and followed. They reached deck 19 before the second problem arrived. Not soldiers, but a collapsed section of tunnel. Somewhere in the initial assault, something had hit the station hard enough to buckle a 30-meter stretch of maintenance passage, folding it down at one end and tearing a coolant pipe that had since emptied and gone cold, leaving the floor slick and the walls buckled inward. Sarah looked at it. We go back. Ray crouched at the entry of the collapse and studied it for a long moment. Then he stood, went back to his cart, and began pulling things out of it. A pressurized coolant coupling, a maintenance sled, flat, low, used for moving under heavy equipment, a spool of wire. Give me 10 minutes, he said. It took 12. He ran the wire through the buckled section first, feeling the path by hand in the dark where the passage narrowed. Then he attached the sled, laid it flat in the lowest part of the passage, and rigged the coupling to give them a controlled push through the slickest section. He went through first. Then he called her through. Sarah came through on the sled, flat on her stomach, her crest pressed hard against her skull, the walls of the buckled section an inch from her face on both sides. She did not close her eyes. She kept them open, and she moved forward, and she did not make a sound. On the other side, Ray helped her up. Good, he said. Just the one word. For reasons she could not entirely explain, that one word mattered more to her than any formal commendation she had ever received. They pushed on, and the station above them was still full of enemy footsteps, and they had a long way to go yet. But the path was there, and Ray Calloway knew every inch of it. The sound of crying was what found them first. Not loud crying. The kind that someone was trying very hard to muffle. Short, pressed-down sounds coming from behind a sealed door on Deck 17, in a section Ray recognized as secondary medical storage. He stopped walking when he heard it. Sarah heard it a second later and went still. Someone is in there, she said. I know. Ray was already looking at the door. It was a standard medical bay emergency seal, heavy, designed to lock from the inside in the event of a biological containment situation. Someone had engaged it manually. His keycard would not work on that one. He knocked 3 times, steady and not loud. Silence from inside. The crying had stopped. Maintenance, he said quietly, against the door seam. My name is Ray Calloway. I work on this station. I have a civilian with me. If you're in there and you're safe, I just need to know, and we'll move on. If you need help, open the door. Nothing for 5 seconds. Then the lock clicked, and the door opened. There were 5 of them inside. A human woman in a medical uniform, Nurse Obafemi, according to the badge clipped to her collar, her name tag reading the full version that Ray shortened immediately, and 4 civilians. 3 were Galactic Union Station workers, humans, sitting on the floor with their backs to the storage shelving. The 4th was an alien, smaller than the others, hunched near the far wall with his hands pressed flat on his knees. He was young, Vorkai by the look of his skin, pale gray, with the ridge structure along his jaw and neck that marked his species. He was wearing a Vorkai military uniform, though he had removed the rank insignia and turned the collar down. Obafemi had a medical kit open on the floor. 2 of the station workers had injuries, one with a deep gash across his forearm, bandaged tightly, and one who was holding his ribs with the careful stillness of someone managing real pain. She looked at Ray. Then she looked at Sarah. She took in the situation in about 2 seconds. How are you moving around out there? She said. The corridors are full of them. Maintenance tunnels, Ray said. How long have you been in here? Since the first blast doors came down. Obafemi stepped back and let them fully inside. I was pulling supplies from storage when the lockdown hit. These 3 came in after me. She glanced at the Vorkai youth in the corner. He came in 20 minutes after that. He knocked. He was shaking. Ray looked at the young Vorkai. He looked back. His eyes were a pale yellow-green, very wide, and he had the specific expression of someone who had committed to a decision and was now terrified of what came next. What's your name? Ray asked. Braun, the young man said. His voice was thin. I was a signals technician. 3rd assignment. I did not volunteer for this. They conscripted me 4 months ago. He stopped, then added, very quietly, I do not want to be here. Sarah straightened immediately. He is Vorkai military. He could be. A scared kid in a corner, Ray said evenly. He was still looking at Braun. Are you armed? No. Braun held both hands out, open, palms up. I left everything. My kit. My rank tag. I left it all in the corridor when I ran. Why did you run? Because Commander Dran ordered us to shoot any civilian who did not comply immediately with surrender commands. Braun's voice cracked on the last few words. I am a signals technician. I fix communication relays. I did not sign up to shoot civilians in a corridor. The room was quiet for a moment. Ray nodded once. He turned to Obafemi. The two who are hurt. Can they walk? Adara can walk, but not fast. She nodded at the woman with the bandaged arm. Ren needs to stay off that rib. If it's cracked and not broken, he can move. If it's broken, moving wrong could puncture a lung. Can you tell which? Obafemi's expression said that she needed equipment she did not have. I can make my best guess. Make it. She went back to Ren and pressed her hands carefully along his side, asking him to breathe at different depths. Ren's face went tight and then eased in specific places. Obafemi sat back. Cracked. 2 of them, I think. Not broken through. He can move, Ray said. Carefully. Ray looked at all of them. He looked at the room, the supplies, the medical kit, the small sealed space. He made decisions the way he always made them, quickly and without drama. We're heading for Deck 7. Communications array. If we can get a signal out to the Ithori fleet, he glanced at Sarah, they may be able to respond before the Vorkai finish locking down the approach routes. There's a fleet, Obafemi said. There was a diplomatic delegation on board, Sarah said. My people will have noticed the communication silence by now. They will be coming. Then we need the array, Ray said. He looked at Braun. You said you're a signals technician. Braun nodded. Vorkai military communication encryption. You know it. I built relay trees for it. 3 weeks before this assignment. Braun sat up a little. I know the frequency bands they're using to suppress the station's outgoing signal. Then you're useful, Ray said. Which means you come with us. He let the statement settle. Can you live with that? Walking away from your side. Braun looked at his own hands. Then up. I already did. Ray picked up his cart and started reorganizing it, redistributing weight, making space. Obafemi folded her medical kit and slung it over her shoulder without being asked. The 2 mobile station workers got to their feet. Ren moved slowly, bracing himself, and Obafemi stayed close to him. Adara was steady on her feet despite the bandaged arm. Sarah fell in beside Ray. She said, low enough for only him to hear, You trust the Vorkai boy? I trust that he's more scared of Drawn than he is of us, Ray said. For now, that's enough. They moved into the maintenance tunnel again, now a group of 7, and Ray adjusted everything in his head, the pace, the route, the noise level, the timing. More people meant slower movement. It also meant more eyes, more hands, and a signals technician who might be able to cut through the Vorkai communications blackout. The trade was worth it. Sully's voice came through the tablet an hour later, while they were navigating a junction on Deck 14. Ray, I have intercepted a Vorkai command broadcast. Commander Drawn has ordered a full sweep of all non-primary decks. For soldier teams in the maintenance network, they're using thermal imaging equipment. Ray stopped the group. He thought. Thermal imaging would pick up body heat through most of the tunnel walls, too many of them to mask individually. Is the industrial heat exchange corridor still accessible from this level? He asked Sully. A pause. Yes. Junction C7, 40 meters north of your current position. Thermal output from the exchange system runs at approximately 340 Kelvin baseline. Individual human and Ithori thermal signatures would be indistinguishable from background noise inside it. Obafemi looked at Ray. How hot is it in there? Hot, Ray said. Uncomfortable, but not dangerous if we move through quickly. I clean the filters in that section. The heat spikes are near the upper units. We stay low, stay moving. How long is the section? She asked. About 90 meters. Ren's breathing will be harder in heat. Harder than being found by a forced soldier thermal sweep. She pressed her lips together. Let's go. They moved. The heat exchange corridor was everything Ray had promised. A long industrial passage lined with enormous exchange units that radiated in waves, making the air shimmer faintly. It was like walking through the exhaled breath of something enormous. Ren struggled. Obafemi kept a hand on his arm and talked him through each section in a low, steady voice. Braun, who had a higher baseline body temperature than humans, handled it better than most and helped support Adara through the worst section. Sarah did not complain. She walked through it with her head down and her eyes forward. When they came out the other side into the cooler maintenance passage, everyone was sweating and breathing hard. Ren sat against the wall and Obafemi checked him immediately. He's fine, she said after a moment. Winded. Ray checked the tablet. Sully had tracked the thermal sweep unit, 4 soldiers who had entered the maintenance network on Deck 15 and moved through the exact corridor they had just vacated. The sweep had not found them. Then Sully spoke again, and his tone carried something different in it. Not urgency, but the digital equivalent of a quiet hand on the shoulder. Ray, I've picked up another signal. A Vorkai command channel, high priority. A short pause. HFY warships have entered the outer system. 6 vessels. They are moving on an intercept course with the station. Sarah's crest lifted fully for the first time since the lockdown began. However, Sully continued, Drawn has activated the station's own external defense grid. It's being operated by Vorkai personnel. The HFY fleet cannot approach without taking fire from the station's own weapons. The crest came back down. The group was silent. Obafemi looked at Ray. Braun looked at the floor. Sarah stood very still. Ray looked at the station map on the tablet for a long time. The external defense grid had its primary control node on Deck 3, one of the most heavily guarded sections of the station, close to the original docking administration area that the Vorkai would have seized first. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "We need to change the plan." And everyone waited for him to tell them what that meant. Because in a station full of soldiers and locked corridors and turned weapons, a human janitor with a mop cart and a tablet was still the most dangerous thing in the room. Nobody in the group liked the plan. That was how Ray knew it was the right one. He laid it out plainly, sitting on the floor of the maintenance junction with the tablet between him and the others. The external defense grid's primary control node was on Deck 3. If someone could reach that node and manually override it, the grid would go offline. The HFY fleet could then approach and dock. Simple. The problem was that Deck 3 was not like the lower maintenance decks, quiet and forgotten. It was the administrative heart of the station, and the Vorkai would have put soldiers there in numbers from the first hour. How many? Obafemi said. Braun. Ray looked at the young Vorkai. Braun pressed his hands together. Deck 3 was listed as a priority control zone in our boarding briefing. Minimum 12 soldiers at all times. Commander Drawn's mobile command unit is likely positioned somewhere between Deck 2 and Deck 4 as well. He paused. Going there it is not a small risk. 12 soldiers, Obafemi said flatly. And you're proposing to walk in. Not walk in, Ray said. Create a situation where 12 soldiers have better things to do than stand around the control node. He explained it from the beginning, step by step. The station's automated maintenance drone network, small robotic units used for cleaning and minor repairs, was still running on its default programming because the Vorkai had not thought to shut it down. Why would they? They were cleaning drones. Ray could access the drone network from any maintenance junction terminal and override the default movement patterns. He could send every drone on Decks 2 through 5 in the wrong direction at the same time, into corridors, into patrol paths, bumping against walls, triggering motion sensors, generally creating the impression that the station's automated systems had gone haywire. Additionally, the ventilation system on those decks connected to the chemical storage units Ray had access to from the maintenance network. There was a compound stored in those units, completely harmless, used for pipe joint sealing during maintenance, that had a side effect. It smelled extraordinarily bad. Not dangerous, just profoundly, inescapably unpleasant. Ray could introduce a controlled amount of it into the ventilation on Decks 2 through 5. And there was one more element. Every junction on the station had a local power relay that could be accessed with Ray's maintenance keycard. By triggering a specific sequence on the relays between Decks 2 and 5, he could cause the lighting to behave erratically, flickering, cutting, shifting between emergency red and full white. Not a power failure, just instability. Put them all together. Drones behaving wrong, a smell that made eyes water at 20 meters, and lights strobing in a way that made every corridor feel like something was catastrophically breaking. 12 soldiers would not stand still. They would respond. They would spread out to check on things. They would report to Drawn. And during those 9 or 10 minutes of confusion, one person could slip into the control node and reach the grid override. One person, Sarah said. She had been quiet through the whole explanation. You said one person? The node access hatch is small, Ray said. And one person makes less noise and less heat signature than 7. You're going alone. Yes. That is not acceptable. Ray looked at her. It's the only way it works. You could be caught. You could be, she stopped. If I get caught, Ray said, I'm a janitor who got turned around in his own maintenance tunnels. That's a story that holds up for a few minutes, and a few minutes is all I'd need to finish the override. He picked up the tablet. If you get caught, the whole situation changes. Drawn gets what he came for, the fleet stays locked out, and everyone on this station who's been hiding has a much worse day. Sarah's crest was fully raised, and then, slowly, it came down again. It was not agreement, not really. It was the recognition that he was correct, which was a different and harder thing. You come back, she said. It was not a request. That's the plan, Ray said. He set the others in a holding position, a wide maintenance junction on Deck 9 that had 2 exits, enough room for everyone to sit, and a ventilation connection Ray had blocked from the Vorkai side earlier. Obafemi had supplies. Braun had the tablet's secondary screen and could monitor the Vorkai communication channels from there, watching for anything that suggested the group had been found. Adara and the other worker would stay quiet. Rin would rest. Ray took only his keycard, his work light, a small wiring kit, and the handheld cutting torch. He left the cart. He moved alone for the first time in hours, and the difference was immediately apparent. Alone, he could move faster, make decisions without explanation, take routes that were too narrow or too complicated for a group. He went through a vertical shaft without using the rungs, just pressure against the walls, feet and back, controlled descent. He crossed a section of tunnel so low he had to move on his elbows. He did all of this without noise, without hurry. He reached the junction terminal on Deck 6 and activated the drone network override from there. Sully confirmed execution. On the screens, Ray could see tiny indicator lights that represented the maintenance drones, and one by one, they began moving in wrong directions. He initiated the ventilation compound release next, a small valve access buried in a pipe cluster, the kind of thing only someone who maintained those pipes would know existed. Then he moved to the first power relay junction and started the lighting sequence. By the time he reached Deck 4 through a utility shaft, the station above him was already behaving badly. He could hear it. Muffled voices, the buzz and cut of lights, the faint skitter of drone units moving where they should not be. And even through the tunnel walls, something deeply unpleasant was beginning to drift through the ventilation. Ray did not have a strong sense of smell, which was an advantage in this particular work, but he pulled his collar up over his nose anyway. The control node for the external defense grid was behind a panel in the Deck 3 administrative maintenance room, a small space used by station engineers to access the building systems that ran the administrative level. It was the kind of room that almost everyone on the station knew existed and almost nobody ever went into, because it was full of junction boards and cable runs and nothing else. Almost nobody. Ray eased through the utility shaft exit, stepped into the administrative maintenance room, and stopped. There was a soldier in the room. Not a patrolling soldier, a stationed one, sitting on a crate with a weapon across his knees, presumably assigned to guard this specific access point, because Drawn was thorough enough to think of it. The soldier looked up, surprised, because nobody had come through that shaft in the time he had been watching it. Ray and the soldier looked at each other for approximately 1 second. Then Ray's maintenance sled, which he had folded flat and tucked under one arm, habit, just in case, came off his arm in a fast horizontal swing that connected with the crate the soldier was sitting on. The crate shifted. The soldier grabbed for it, off balance. Ray stepped in, hooked the back of the soldier's ankle with his foot, and took him to the ground in a controlled fall, putting his weight on the weapon arm so it could not come up. There was a brief, quiet struggle. Brief, because Ray had the leverage and the angle, and the soldier had neither. The soldier went still, not harmed, but thoroughly pinned, with the cutting torch pressed gently against the side of his neck. A cutting torch was not a weapon, but it was very warm, and the sound it made when it powered up was very recognizable. "Stay quiet," Ray said. "Not if you understand." The soldier nodded. Ray secured him with a length of wire from the kit, hands, not tight enough to hurt, loose enough to be humane, and left him against the wall. He moved to the junction board at the back of the room and found the defense grid control interface. Sully walked him through it via earpiece, reading out the override sequence from intercepted Vorkai installation records that Braun had provided access to. It took 9 minutes. Ray's hands did not shake. He worked the same way he always worked, methodically, without rushing, checking each connection before moving to the next. It was the same attention he gave to a broken filtration unit or a pressure seal. A thing needed doing. He did it. The grid status indicator on the junction board shifted from green to dark. External defense grid is offline, Sully said. Ithori fleet approach vectors are no longer opposed. Ray stood up. He looked at the secured soldier on the floor. The man was watching him with an expression that was half anger and half something Ray could not quite read. Maybe bewilderment. Someone will find you in a few minutes when the chaos upstairs settles down, Ray said. The knot's loose enough that you can work it free eventually. Don't rush it. He went back through the shaft. Above him, he could already hear it. A change in the quality of the station's sounds. Distant impacts, the vibration of docking clamps activating, the deep hum of large ship engines making contact with the hull. The Ithori fleet was docking. Ray moved back through the tunnels toward Deck 9. The lights were still flickering. The smell was still very bad. The drones were still running the wrong way. None of that mattered now. What mattered was that somewhere above him, Commander Dron had just received a report that his defense grid was down. And that same report would tell him something else, that this had been done from inside, by someone who knew this station in a way his soldiers did not. Dron was not a careless man. He would start looking. Ray walked a little faster. Commander Dron did not shout when he received the report about the defense grid. He stood at the temporary command station his unit had established on Deck 4, and he read the report twice, and then he sat down and thought. He was 60 years old by Vorkai reckoning, which meant he had been in military operations for 4 decades. He had taken stations before. He had held positions before. He understood the mechanics of resistance, the patterns it fell into, and the profiles of the people who led it. A resistance leader tended to be either a soldier who had survived the initial assault and regrouped, or a senior official with resources and communications. Both left specific traces. The first moved in tactical patterns with combat logic. The second tried to use rank-level systems and often triggered access logs in places they should not have been. What had happened in the last 4 hours did not match either profile. The movement pattern was too patient for a soldier. No attempt at confrontation, no effort to reach a defensible position or hold it. Pure evasion and sophisticated evasion. Whoever was moving through his soldier's coverage net was using the maintenance network in a way that suggested they understood it structurally, not just geographically. They were not reading a map. They were moving through a place they knew. The defense grid override had been executed from the administrative maintenance room on Deck 3. Not the main control room. Not the engineering bridge. A secondary access point buried inside a service panel. The kind of access point that did not appear on any standard tactical briefing because it was not considered a control point. It was a maintenance point. Dron pulled up the station's personnel records. He filtered for maintenance and engineering staff. He narrowed by work area. He found the entry he was looking for in under 2 minutes. Ray Calloway, Station Maintenance, Deck 31 Primary Assignment, 11-year service record, full maintenance network access level, former military engineer, union service, medically discharged. Dron looked at the work access log that came up beneath the name. The man had worked on nearly every system in the station over 11 years. Filtration, ventilation, power relays, drone network, defense systems secondary access panels. Defense systems secondary access panels. Serviced, most recently, 14 months ago. Dron closed the personnel record. Not a soldier, he said, to no one in particular. Not a spy. Not an official. He leaned back. A maintenance worker. He was genuinely impressed. He did not show it, but he was. He made 2 decisions quickly. First, send the tracker unit into the maintenance network. 4 of his best, equipped with thermal mapping gear, tasked with finding and cutting off the group. They would not catch the maintenance worker by tracking his patterns. The man had already proven he was better at that game than Dron's soldiers were, but they might cut off the route to the docking bay, which was the only destination that mattered now. Second, Dron himself would go to the docking bay and wait. He was not a man who sent others to do the things that mattered. Ray reached the Deck 9 junction at almost the same moment that Sully flagged the tracker unit entering the maintenance network. He told the group to move immediately. No rest, no preparation. They were on their feet and in the tunnels in under a minute, which was not easy for Ruan, who managed it without complaint. They made good time for the first 3 levels. Ray kept them ahead of the tracker unit by varying the route, never taking the most direct path, doubling back once through a section where a broken sensor gave them a blind spot, using the heat exchange corridor again for one short stretch to break the thermal trace. Braun monitored the Vorkai communication channel through the tablet and gave Ray the tracker's last reported position every few minutes. They stayed 2 levels ahead. The problem arrived at Deck 13, the main cargo concourse. Ray had known it was coming. It was the one unavoidable open stretch on their route, a wide, high-ceilinged space used for cargo transfers, with loading arms along both walls and stacks of sealed containers arranged in rows. It was 60 meters of open floor, no maintenance tunnels cutting through it. There were cameras. There were, according to Braun's signal monitoring, 2 Vorkai soldiers at the far end near the concourse's main exit. "We can go around," Obafemi said, looking at the tablet map. "Around adds 40 minutes and takes us through a section the tracker unit is heading for," Ray said. "Then what do we do?" Ray studied the concourse from the maintenance hatch, which opened at one end of the space near a row of large cargo containers. The containers were stacked in a rough line that ran most of the length of the room. Not a wall, not a solid barrier, but enough visual cover if you stayed on the right side of them. The 2 soldiers at the far end were standing near the exit door, facing it rather than the concourse interior. The loading arms were the more interesting element. They ran on automated rails along the upper walls, designed to move cargo containers between the floor and the upper storage racks. They were still running on station power, still responsive to the dock management system. Ray had access to the dock management system through his maintenance keycard, not full control, but enough to trigger a cargo sequence call. "Wait here," he said. He went back to a junction terminal 10 meters behind them, accessed the dock management system, and queued 3 cargo movement requests in the concourse. Legitimate-looking container shifts that the automated arms would carry out in sequence. The arms would move. Containers would shift. It would generate sound, movement, and sensor data that the soldiers at the far end would register as normal cargo operations, because the system was technically running normally. He went back to the group. "When the arms start moving, we cross on the container side. The noise covers footsteps. We move in 2 groups. Obafemi stays with Ruin. They cross first. I'll bring everyone else." The arms started moving 2 minutes later. The concourse filled with the low mechanical groan of heavy equipment in motion, not loud, but pervasive, the kind of constant ambient noise that made other sounds harder to isolate. Obafemi got Ruin moving. They crossed close to the container wall, heads down, moving at the best pace Rin could manage. The soldiers at the far end did not turn around. The second group started. Adara, Braun, the other station worker. Ray last. They were halfway across when the tracker unit came through the maintenance hatch behind them. Ray heard the hatch open. He did not run. Running would make them visible. He said, very quietly, to the group in front of him, "Don't stop. Keep moving. Same speed." And he dropped back. The tracker unit had 4 soldiers. They came through the hatch in a line, thermal mapping units active, and the moment they entered the concourse they would have thermal readings on everyone crossing the floor. But the cargo arms were still moving, and the container shifts had created a stack and gap arrangement that put a column of containers between the hatch and the crossing path. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Ray reached the dock management terminal mounted on the concourse wall, swiped his keycard, and called an emergency stop on all active cargo operations. Every arm in the concourse lurched to a halt. In the sudden silence, the locked loading arms swung slightly on their rails from the sudden deceleration, creating a chain of metallic bangs that rang through the entire space. Both soldiers at the far exit turned toward the sound. The tracker unit stopped moving and looked toward the nearest arm. The group reached the far exit. But one of the tracker soldiers was already turning back, thermal mapping units sweeping the concourse, and it was going to find Ray in about 4 seconds. Ray reached up, grabbed the manual release on the nearest loading arm, a lever used by maintenance workers to free stuck arms without going through the system, and pulled it. The arm, already stopped mid-motion, released from its magnetic rail lock and swung freely on its pivot joint. It was not a violent movement. It was slow, mechanical, inevitable, a 2-ton cargo arm swinging out across the concourse floor on a long arc. It was not going to hit anyone. It was not designed to. But it crossed directly between Ray and the tracker unit, and it took the arm about 6 seconds to complete its swing, and in those 6 seconds Ray walked to the far exit and went through it. He found the group in the corridor beyond, all of them breathing hard. Obafemi had Rin against the wall. Sarah was watching the door. "Go," Ray said. They went. The docking bay was 3 levels down, accessible from a maintenance access corridor that bypassed the main stairwells. Ray could hear the sounds of the station changing around them as they moved. The distant vibration of Ithori ships making hard dock, the muffled boom of airlocks engaging, the subtle shift in air pressure that came with large hull connections being established. The fleet was in. Somewhere on the upper decks, Drawn's forces were being pushed back by boarding soldiers, and the situation was shifting. It was almost over. They came through the maintenance access corridor into the docking bay approach, a wide, plain stretch of floor leading to the bay's main airlock gates, currently sealed. Beyond those gates, on the other side, were Ithori ships and Ithori soldiers, and the end of this. Drawn was standing at the far end of the approach. Just him. No soldiers behind him. His weapon was in his hand, but not raised, held at his side, as though he had not yet decided what he was going to do with it. He was looking directly at Ray. The group stopped. Obafemi moved Rin to the wall. Braun pressed himself back. Sarah stepped forward, and Ray put his arm out, blocking her. "Let me," he said. Drawn looked at all of them for a moment. Then his gaze came back to Ray and stayed there. Neither of them spoke. The station hummed around them. Somewhere far above, there was a sound like a distant door being forced open, the Ithori boarding parties, working their way down. Drawn raised his weapon. Then he lowered it again, halfway, holding it at a diagonal that was not aimed at anyone. And he waited. Some silences have weight. The kind that gathers between two people who both know that what they say next matters, and neither of them is in a hurry to say the wrong thing. The docking bay approach stretched between Ray Calloway and Commander Drawn like a held breath, and the station hummed around them both, and nobody moved. Drawn spoke first. "You are the one," he said. Not a question. His galactic command was precise, almost formal. "The one who has been doing all of this." "I maintain things," Ray said. "Keeping people alive is just another form of maintenance." Drawn looked at him for a long moment. He was a tall man, broad, with the heavy ridge structure along his brow that came with Vorkai military conditioning from a young age. His face was not cruel. It was the face of someone who had made a great many difficult decisions and had stopped losing sleep over them. Not because he did not care, but because he had decided that the work was more important than the weight. Ray recognized that kind of face. He had seen it in mirrors before, though on a much quieter scale. "I reviewed the station records," Drawn said. "After my defense grid went offline. I looked at the access logs, the maintenance records, the personnel file." He tilted his head slightly. 11 years. 11 years, Ray agreed. "You worked on the defense system's secondary panels 14 months ago." Routine check. The sealant on the panel housing was cracking. "And while you were checking the sealant," Drawn said, "you also noticed exactly which access points could be used to reach the grid override interface." "I noticed most things," Ray said. "Part of the job." Drawn's expression shifted, very slightly. It was not a smile. It was closer to the look a craftsman gives when he examines another person's work and finds it good. "My tracker unit reported that they lost your group in the cargo concourse. They said the cargo arms were moving. Scheduled dock operations." "Scheduled." Drawn repeated the word with the faint tone of someone who did not believe it for a moment and appreciated the claim anyway. "You filed a cargo sequence request while being pursued through the concourse. Takes about 30 seconds at a dock management terminal." "Yes," Drawn said. "I imagine it does." He was quiet for a moment. 4 decades of military operations. "I have encountered resistance and taken stations before. Soldiers, intelligence operatives, facility security staff." He paused. "I have not before been outmaneuvered by a man whose primary qualification was cleaning filters." "Knowing where all the filters are is very useful," Ray said. Behind him, he could hear Obafemi's shifting position, keeping herself and Rin near the wall. He could hear Sarah, who was very close behind him and very still, which required considerable effort from her given everything he had come to know about her in the last several hours. Drawn looked past Ray, briefly, at the group. His gaze moved across Obafemi, across the station workers, across Braun, who went very rigid when the commander's eyes landed on him, and then to Sarah. His gaze held there for a moment, professionally assessing, and then came back to Ray. "The station is lost," Drawn said. He said it without drama, the way a man reports a weather change. "Your fleet is docking. My forces are being pushed back. I made my calculation when I came here. If the defense grid failed, the rest would follow." He looked at the weapon in his hand as if seeing it for the first time, and then he reholstered it with a short, practiced motion. "There are things I would do in a battle that are clearly worth doing. Standing in a corridor, trying to hold a moment that has already passed, is not one of them." Ray said nothing. "I would like to know the name of the man who did this," Drawn said. "Not for a report. Not for any purpose that will cause you difficulty. I want to know it because I was beaten fairly, in a way I did not anticipate, and I believe that deserves acknowledgement." He paused. "In my culture, that acknowledgement means knowing the name." "Ray Calloway," Ray said. Drawn held it for a moment. "Ray Calloway." He said the name carefully, setting it in place somewhere in his memory. "You were a military engineer. A long time ago. You are wasted in maintenance work." Ray considered this. "I'm exactly where I chose to be," he said. Something in Drawn's expression shifted again. This time Ray thought it might actually be understanding. The specific kind that comes when a man recognizes another man's reasons, even if they are not reasons he would choose himself. A soldier who had stepped back from soldiering. A person who had decided that quiet and useful was better than important and loud. Drawn stepped aside. He moved to the left wall of the approach corridor and stood against it, clear of the path. The airlock gates were ahead, sealed, waiting. He looked at Ray. "For what it is worth," he said, "you should consider that your species has been very much underestimated." "We know," Ray said. He turned. He looked at the group: Obafemi, Rin, Adara, the other station worker, Braun, and Sarah. They were all looking at him, waiting. He nodded toward the airlock gates. They moved. Ray walked at the back, and as he passed Drawn, neither of them said anything else. The acknowledgement had already been made. There was nothing to add. He swiped his keycard at the airlock control panel. Maintenance override. The kind of access that the Vorkai had not thought to restrict because it was for life support connections, not docking protocols, and the gates opened. Beyond them was the pressurized docking corridor that connected the station to the Ithori fleet ships, and it was full of Ithori soldiers in formal combat configuration, moving fast and orderly in the other direction. They stopped when they saw Sarah. There was a moment of absolute stillness, the kind that happens when soldiers recognize someone they did not expect to find alive. Then the nearest officer spoke something in the Ithori formal language that Ray did not know well, and Sarah answered in it, and the officer pressed his fist to his chest and held it there. They were ushered onto the shuttle. Obafemi stayed close to Ron, who sat down immediately and leaned his head back with the slow exhale of someone who had been managing pain for too long and was finally allowed to stop. Adara sat next to him. Braun was met by two Ithori security officers who spoke to him in quiet, careful tones and guided him to a separate seat, not roughly, but with the clear intention of having a longer conversation later. Sarah stood near the shuttle door and watched Ray. Around her, Ithori officials were moving, her personal attendants, officers, medics coming forward to check on her. She stood through all of it, still watching him. Ray was looking at his keycard. He put it back in his pocket. Sarah moved toward him. Her attendants began to follow, and she made a small gesture with two fingers that stopped them in their tracks without her looking at them. She stood in front of Ray. She straightened, and there was a formal quality to it, a deliberate lifting of her spine that he had not seen in the last several hours of crawling through maintenance tunnels. An Ithori formal address had specific ritual phrasing. He knew that much, something about the acknowledgement of service and the weight of debt and the binding of honor. She opened her mouth, and the first few words came out with that ritual shape. Then she stopped. She looked at him for a moment. This man who had mopped floors and fixed filtration units and moved through tunnels he knew by feel, who had planned for escape routes before speaking a single word to her and had explained none of it until it mattered, who had brought 7 people out of a locked station against a military force and had done it with a maintenance card, a tablet AI, and 11 years of quiet attention. She abandoned the ritual phrasing. "Thank you, Ray," she said. Ray nodded once. There was a stool near the shuttle wall, and someone had left a small toolkit on it. A Thori engineering kit, different from his, but recognizable in purpose. He reached out, automatically, and pushed it to a safer position where it would not fall in transit. Habit. Sully's voice crackled in his earpiece. Ray. Yeah. The Thori Historical Archive is broadcasting a preliminary incident report. They have included your name in it. Ray looked out through the shuttle's forward window at the station. His station, most of it, the lower decks and maintenance corridors, and 11 years of work. Tell them to spell it right. They spelled it correctly. Good. He found a seat and sat down, and the shuttle door sealed, and Station Drilova 9 fell away behind them as they moved into the docking interior of the Ithori flagship, and it was over. 3 weeks later, after the station had been retaken and repaired and reopened under new security arrangements, Ray was back on Deck 22 with a new mop. The floors on the reconstructed section were still fresh, brighter than the rest, the kind of bright that faded in about 8 months under regular foot traffic. Ray preferred the older floors, but the new ones needed cleaning too. He had his earpiece in. Sully was playing the ballgame. A young Ithori diplomat came around the corner at the end of the corridor, one of the new liaison staff assigned to the station under the revised Galactic Union arrangement. She was walking quickly, reading something on a screen, and almost passed him without looking up. Then she stopped. She looked at him, at the mop, at the maintenance cart. "Excuse me," she said, in careful galactic common. "Are you Ray Calloway?" He looked up. "Yes." She stared. The way people stared when the image in their head did not match what was in front of them. "You saved the princess." "I knew the way out," he said. She kept staring. He put his earpiece back in, and picked up the mop, and started on the next section. Some things did not need more words than that. He had been in this corridor before, hundreds of times, and the floor needed the same attention it always had. The work did not change because of what had happened. It was still the same station, still the same floors, still the same slow circles. Left, right, overlap, pull back. The galaxy moved on around him, loud and important, and full of things worth noticing. Ray noticed all of it, and said very little, and kept the floors clean.